We've been getting tactical in D&D here. We've been exploring the dungeon, looking at it somewhat from the perspective of maybe a miniature war game. That point in the adventure when the DM says, roll for initiative. And we're moving into fighting some monsters, putting out the miniatures, taking a step back for the moment, especially in a larger dungeon-type game, dungeon-type adventure, the importance of party order. Physically marking down how the party is going to walk through the dungeon, because at most points of the dungeon, it's going to be single file. You're moving down corridors that are maybe 5 feet by 10 feet wide. You might go into a room that's maybe 20 by 30. Understanding that from the perspective of the DM, of course, they have access to the notes and what's going on. But this idea that the dungeon is a living ecosystem. And we see this with advanced Dungeons and Dragons from back in the day, where you'd have an adventure. You know, you'd purchase one of the pre-made adventures, which were excellent. And in the dungeon aspects, there would be wandering monster charts. And in those charts, there would be a note based on the level of the dungeon that says, like, hey, every 200 feet traveled, if the party hasn't encountered a room or a written down encounter, roll on the random monster chart and see what happens. And most of the time it might have been nothing. Occasionally it was something, and sometimes it was pretty serious. And that random encounter would suddenly attack you. It might be an ambush, but having party order could literally mean the difference between life and death. Now, this could be something as simple in the game as just writing it down on a piece of paper. What I like to do when we're playing with miniatures is take the miniatures and line them up off the map. So this way we know, hey, if something happens, this is the deployment order. This is the order the way that people are going. Fighters in the front. I mean, that seems kind of obvious. For the most part, in a dungeon, you've cleared most of the stuff behind you. And the big unknown, I mean, so you're still vulnerable to wandering monsters, but the big unknown, you're standing there before that stone door and you're going to push it open. Fighters in the front. Barbarians in the front. Paladins in the front. In the middle, clerics. Magic users. Clerics before magic users, because clerics will have more hit points, potentially better armor class. Somewhat spellcasters. This is going to physically, obviously, protect them from the front, because the fighters, the barbarians, the paladins, the warriors, they're in the front. But it also gives them reach the front to the back. In the back, tier 2 warriors. Perfect example, the monk. Maybe a ranger. Pushing that towards the back of the party because they'll be in support. They're protecting literally the ambush from behind, because if you are ambushed from behind, they can hold their own a turn while the fighter and the paladin and the barbarian make their way to the back. But also they shield the magic users, the wizards, the clerics in the party, who are that kind of nucleus in the middle. The floating piece, rogues, thieves. Normally they could operate in the back, stealth mode on, hiding. In the back, with their thieving abilities, they might have better ways to detect, to hear, and protect against ambushes. But I say floating because where they are in the dungeon, they're going to be needed for maybe spot checks, listening checks, searching for traps, checking for secret doors. So in that party order, that composition of the party, we don't necessarily want to dedicate them to a specific spot. We want them to say, hey, we're moving into this part of the dungeon that looks way too new. It looks like it's really still intact. It's got that kind of cult, evil temple vibe. Put the rogue in the front. Start searching for traps. Start looking for things. Maybe we're following that map and we're at the end of the dungeon and it seems like a dead end. Let's have the rogue look for secret doors. Or, hey, we're going really, really deep, uncharted. We hear a lot of noises in the distance. Put the rogue in the back and stealth mode on, listen, spot, pushing along from that perspective on there. But party deployment, party lineup is very important, especially in a dungeon setting, because, again, we don't want to get hit by those random monsters. We don't want to get ambushed. And when we kick that down that door and move to initiative order, in a very tactical way, we want to be ready to deploy out and move. Yet at the same time, if we fail initiative, or if the monsters are just so much faster than us, there's that level of protection at the front.